Welcome. I'm Lori Lee Binstock, and you're listening to a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast. As we wrap up the end of a challenging year, to say the least, I'd like to end the last episode of 2020 with a bit of a silver lining. At the start of 2020, before coronavirus forced Americans to quarantine, I was in a terrible place mentally. And the truth is, I don't believe I would have made it through the first quarter of the year if I didn't seek residential treatment. Which I received in February. So I feel very lucky, and I feel like this year proved to be challenging, but I feel like so many people were able to rise to the occasion. And this is the year I found my voice and was able to do the things I never thought I would be able to pull off. And, I really did get a lot of help. And I'd like to introduce you to two very important colleagues who have helped me with the task of managing social media content and creating weekly newsletters while helping me get this podcast off the ground. My interns, Michael Robb and Sarah Correa-Debar, students at my alma mater, the University of Florida College of Journalism, and cohorts of the Z generation, the generation shaping the social, political, and economics landscape of this country. First off, I want to introduce Mike. Mike, could you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and maybe why you chose to work with me?
Yeah, so I'm Mike Robb, and I from the University of Florida, and I love film production, TV production, and that's through the College of Journalism and Communications. And I also have a passion for just helping, people that need extra help. In high school, I worked with an organization that helped special needs students and even young adults with building confidence and building team skills with in the process of playing sports together. And I was happy to see that I could channel all of that into a podcast and now really a brand through working with Laura Lee.
I also have Sarah. She actually came to me with her impressive resume. She even had her own podcast. At that point, I thought, oh my gosh, she is way more established than I am. Sarah, why don't you tell us why you wanted to be a part of my goals?
I looked at your requirements and I was like, this is perfect. Like, I have a lot to do. Like, this is perfect. And after being in lockdown, the boredom gets to you. And I just felt like I needed to get hands-on with something. And not only that, but like a huge plus was obviously that I was going to help promote mental health and trauma awareness. And I have friends who have experienced trauma or like struggled with, mental health. And it's just really good to know that I can help in some way and open my mind to things people have struggled with.
I really thought it was interesting for me that you brought a lot to the table when it came to Gen Z, just information, everything because I knew I wanted to target, parents and young adults, but I really didn't know how to target them, and you really helped me, and so did Mike. Sarah, how would you describe a Gen Zer in one word?
There's so much to explain because we have grown up with so many changes in comparison to other generations, just social media being a huge one. But I think if I had to describe it in one word, I would say that it's about clarity. We're bringing so much clarity to so many things that, for example, the millennial generation was figuring out, and in the middle of their generation they had all this burst of social media, and we kind of grew up with it.
Mike, how would you describe Gen Zers in one word?
Obviously I didn't grow up in past generations, but I feel like our generation is so many things that it's really just hard to use one word, but I would say probably adaptive, because also, as Sarah said, we've been through a lot. We grew up with the Bush administration. We saw a lot of changes in the world, just with as far as America's place in the world kind of became a bit more pronounced. And, with that, we saw a lot of different leaders taking on the executive positions. We had 3 very different candidates so far in our lifetime, and they shaped, our perception of the world, just like Kennedy shaped the boomers and FDR shaped the greatest generation. I think also with social media, it's been around for a little bit. Millennials kind of had it, but it really started to take off by the time most of us turned into our teenage years. And I think what makes us so special, I think there's just been so much change socially. Like, so many people are socially aware, and we really are putting it upon ourselves to bring a lot of these issues to light with our knowledge of social media, as well as issues like climate change. I think we have really put it on the map. Regardless, I think we always, whether it was good or bad, and were able to adapt to whatever situation was handed to us.
Millennials were the new beginning. That's the whole meaning of their name. But I think we're shedding a light to what that new beginning is about. This generation is bringing all the vulnerabilities to the table with the social media. It used to be, this is something that we don't talk about, but we are making it seem okay.
I do love the fact that people are saying that it's okay to not be okay. I feel like I see more transparency with your generation. I was super dense when it came to social media. That's why I had you guys, and you guys have done so much for me. But I grew up writing papers on a typewriter. I don't even know if you guys ever did that. I needed a crash course in social media, and especially what with you guys in social media. I know a lot of my friends are getting scared of social media because of all of, I guess, conspiracy theory sites and fake news. But how do you see, what are your thoughts about the future of social media, especially in business?
It's all about connections, and it's just made so much easier with social media. Just the other day, I was there's this writer that I really like, for example, and before social media, I don't know how I could have possibly reached to him. And I just got my phone one day and I was I'm just going to DM him on Instagram. And I DM'd him and he responded. And I thought that was so crazy. It was I was starstruck for the whole entire day. And I just think that connections and stuff like that are made so much easier. And especially now with COVID-19, everyone's how am I possibly going to make connections? Especially people who are going to schools in big cities like Boston or New York, that you just meet someone and network so easily. With social media, it's just a lot easier. And for I know that there was a big surge in TikTok. There were a bunch of people, TikTok was a new LinkedIn, kind of a bunch of employers were on there. And because TikTok, I think, is one of the apps that most highlights authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're right there. It's accessibility to people, or influencers, I guess you would call them now. Mike, what do you see as the future of social media?
Just more open. I think it's going to influence the openness of really the whole world, because as we just went over, back in the day, a lot of editing and fake designs and just fake photography really dominated everywhere you looked. And now you don't really see that as much. You see the opposite. It's interesting. Some pictures they're edited, but they're edited so that the natural, body features or just photographs themselves look unedited. We're trying to focus more on natural, natural. That's why everyone loves their natural lighting and their selfies. Because I think a lot of people are afraid of the stigma of the fake news and just fake photography, and these are just little snippets of my life I want you to see. I feel like soon, it'll graduate from just little snippets of our lives that like almost our entire lives will be shared on social media, for better or for worse. I would like to think for better, but I think there are definitely, I think a lot of websites kind of need to get their act together. Like, I will name names because everyone knows that Facebook really needs to work on their security. And so I really think it is safe to say that social media will become a lot more involved in, the average consumer's life.
This year has seemed pretty apocalyptic. Civil unrest, a pandemic, cities burning, killer hornets, economic uncertainty, election anxiety. I think there's a lot more, but we won't even go into that. But, you guys are college students, who should be spending your best years of your lives with friends and, on campus. I know, Mike, you're not on campus, but
No.
Especially with Gator football, how have you managed your mental health?
It has not been easy at all. Aside from all the things happening out in the world that just make you want to stay in even more, I suffered a personal family tragedy early on this year, like really right after it all began. And a pretty tough breakup shortly after. And I think it was the lowest point of my life. I really was not in a good place, to say the least. And I'd never, I'd been sympathetic towards, the people that have mental challenges and just that have suffered emotional abuse. But I had never really been just in that place before, and it was just extremely uncomfortable. No matter how much I sympathize with people who had been through it, it didn't prepare me anymore for that.
Sorry.
It's all right, because everything happens for a reason, and even though this year as a whole has happened, I think the past few months have been a steady upward climb, and the way I got to that climb has been, just reaching out in more ways than one. It doesn't always have to be professional help, although I would recommend it, because that was, where I started to climb back up. But what ultimately, put a stop to my panic attacks and worries is, you have to face your fears. Obviously, you have to be careful about it nowadays, but, my biggest fear was probably the virus. And I didn't go out at all for like a good 4 or 5 months, except to get gas or something. And if you have the means, definitely reach out to professional help.
Absolutely. Sarah, what about you? How have you been managing your mental health this year?
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm sorry, Mike, for your loss.
Thank you.
I can't even imagine. My uncle, I think it was like in the end of the summer, he has been a doctor for the whole entire time of COVID, like helping people with COVID, and he got COVID. And it was like really hard for him to recuperate because he was so tired from helping everyone and like working for so long, so many hours. Thankfully, he got better over time, but yeah, that was really scary. But I think, I traveled abroad. I went abroad to Madrid last fall. And then I came back to college, and then it was just like I came back to UF, and it was just like such a rush. Like, I just came back, and then like I was doing all these things. I was reunited with all of my friends, whatever. And then all of a sudden COVID hit, and then slowly, like one by one, all my friends were going home, and then it was time for me to go home. And then, and then I was home, and then I was taking a multimedia reporting class. And it was just like really, really hard to do that. through a computer. Like I couldn't get anyone that wanted to interview with me. I couldn't do anything. So I was like, I'm literally gonna fail this class and whatever. And I'm a huge extrovert, like huge. And I was like, what even am I supposed to do? Like I can't see my friends. Like I was begging my friends for Zoom calls and then, like Zoom happy hours or whatever. And then I just got even tired of that. And it was just all very stagnant. Like I was just stagnant, like, so after a while I started going to, obviously when she got comfortable with it, because it's both parties because of COVID, going to my therapist and like talking about not just COVID related things, but just like everything. And it's like so refreshing to have a therapist because it's kind of like a diary that speaks back to you.
Yeah.
So I definitely recommend that, and I would not stop recommending a therapist to like all of my friends who like were going through it worse than me, because I don't want to sound like, I don't know, like privileged or something, but I wasn't like really struggling, because thankfully like my parents helped me a lot, and they even made a study room for me and for me to continue my studies. But yeah, I just think that. And then another thing that helped me was just focusing on myself. I was like, you know what, this is a time that I really can focus on myself. I was like working out a lot. I would do yoga, and it like reminded me of you, Laura, because you are always doing yoga.
Not recently, but yeah, it does help.
Yeah,
It does
exercise
help.
is key.
Yeah,
as
exercise
well.
is key.
I could imagine how tough that is. And the uncertainty is so difficult because how can you plan? I was away from DC for 8 months, and I was literally living out of a suitcase. And so not knowing when my kids were going to go back to school, or if they were like, it was troubling, and it was really difficult. And, something that you touched on about, seeing a therapist, both of you. Yes. And, and to be honest, yeah, mental health, getting care for mental health is, I believe, a privilege. It shouldn't be a privilege, but it is, unfortunately. But yes, if you do have the means, I think even if you don't think you're doing so bad, seeing a therapist can help you organize and figure out, especially with such uncertainty, how to kind of get through all of it. What is the biggest worry about the future for Gen Zers?
I can't speak for everyone, but I think our biggest fear is becoming a world of superficiality and looks. I know that other generations think it's ridiculous how much we post on social media. Like my family always talks about it. And like my mom is always like, Sadie, now I understand why you spend so much time on Instagram. This thing like takes work, and I just think it's like really hard for other generations to understand how important it is to us. Like that's literally our networking. Like that's how we're going to advance in the world. And it's fairly new. And I just think that it's really important to distinguish your needs versus your image, because a lot of people do really get sucked in and like, oh, this is like, I always have to look good for social media and blah, blah, blah. And I think that's my biggest worry for our generation and for future generations, is that like realness is stripped away, and the only thing that matters is what you post on Instagram. And like, I don't think that's healthy for bringing it back to like this podcast. I don't think it's healthy for anyone's mental health. So I think that's important. Obviously that's like the worst case scenario, because there are so many good things that happen from social media. But
yeah, what about you, Mike?
So there's a lot, as Sarah said, but for me as a Gen Zer that was right on the 2000 mark, with being able to kind of see the remnants of the past century and then transition into the 20th, 21st, with all this really power at our fingertips, because, knowledge is power. I would say I worry about, for us, becoming, just becoming an ignorant generation. We've seen that in every generation, but what's so dangerous about this being in our generation is because, you can really change the world with your phone in your hands. And there's a lot of misinformation, and, it can be almost impossible sometimes to determine what's real and what's not. There are a lot of issues that seem to have fallen on our shoulders, like political climates and climate itself. And I just hope we don't give up and become indifferent, because we have a lot of drive, I think, deep down, and if we can consolidate that, then that'll really fix a lot of problems in the long run.
With social media, that's really how you can really go far. I mean, I love doing the podcast. You guys know that. I hate doing anything with social media. That's why I have you guys, right? But, if I want to pitch a TV script, the first thing a producer will tell me is build your social media engagement. I want to write a children's book, a memoir. Build your social media engagement. Even to get people to listen to the podcast, build your social media engagement. Yeah. Everything is really hinges on that. And, Mike, like you were saying, there was a point where the arguments on social media about what's real and what's fake was just getting to be too much in the last several years. And so I got off social media. But because of this podcast, it's like, am I just destroying my mental health by trying to help others with their mental health and trying to elevate my podcast? So it is like this catch-22, right? So no, I get it. But, according to Pew Research, actually, members of Gen Z are more racially and ethnically diverse than any previous generation, and they are actually on track to be the most well-educated generation yet. Being that you guys are digital natives who really don't, you guys kind of know what it was like to live without smartphones, but do you agree with that your generation is the most well-educated generation?
I think that we are exposed to so much information, like from everywhere, like what Mike was saying. And, I think I was talking about it with a professor one time, that he was saying that, like, when he was a student, he had to go to the library and, like, there was a line of people waiting to get the book for the research. And then now, like, all the students have that, like, in the tips of their fingers. And, like, now we have a subscription. UF has a subscription to the Washington Post and to New York Times. Like, we have so many things. Now, all of a sudden, we're expected to be super smart. Yes, we're exposed to so much information. And yes, we can have tabs in Google on our phone in seconds.
I think we're able to spot a lot of these fake news things and false statements a lot quicker, just based on everything we've gathered over the years.
I think another thing that's different between, like, Generation Z and, my generation of millennials, like older millennials, and even like previous generations, was you had to be a part of, like, a niche, right? There were the jocks and there were the popular kids, the cheerleaders. I don't feel like that exists much. Maybe
Not really.
Yeah, that doesn't exist much because everyone's trying to be their own unique person. And I think that's way better, at least. And just, and being that Gen Z is more racially and ethnically diverse, I feel like Gen Z is also more empathetic. Would you say that?
I think so. Yes, because especially I'm from Miami, so it's literally like diversity everywhere you see. And we've all been exposed to, well, I remember my middle school was full of people from different economic standpoints, different races, different ethnicities, and we've all been exposed to these different things in different ways, like more compassionate, I would like to say, than others. Like, it's just easy for us because we've been exposed to so many immigrants, for example. Like, most of my friends growing up were immigrants.
But you, Mike?
Yeah, I would agree. I think, in fact, to build upon it, we're the most socially conscious generation yet. People you saw in the droves during Vietnam and civil rights, I think we have a lot in common with those people, as we've seen in this year alone. Because, a lot of us are coming of age with voting. I think in Florida, Gen Zers, like people that were just now able to vote in this election, I think it was the highest turnout for like that age, 18 to like 21.
Yeah.
In history, I think so. And
yeah,
I think we've really, on social media, I think everyone's been given their own unique voice. And like you said, Laura Lee, how cliques in schools are really starting to dissolve. People are really becoming their own thing. And I think, because our parents grew up when, civil rights was really, its effects were finally taking root in the 70s and 80s. And the world was just naturally more conscious of, things like the Berlin Wall and Vietnam and just, stuff like Woodstock and all that. I think kind of affected them in a way that was like, we want to pass this on to our kids. And like, because I think there was a really special wholesomeness to the American dream in the 1960s. Like, it started to kind of expand to being, more about, anyone can attain this dream, not just a white American. And I think, with social media, we've seen, more people of varying ethnic backgrounds get more of a voice because of social media. And because it's become so central to our lives, I think naturally we've become the most colorblind generation.
For both of you, I think this recent election was probably the first one you guys could legally vote in. Is that right?
Yeah.
Sarah? I think,
yes.
Yes. Okay. How significant was it for you guys?
It was actually really exciting for me. I never voted at all. I remember when I was in like 8th grade, it was like the Obama election, and we had to like cast like fake ballots in the school. And
Yep.
I thought that was so exciting. And like, even if I had to send my ballot in the mail, like, I felt important. Like, it was something that I was contributing to the nation that like my parents brought me to, and like I just felt really proud. Like, despite all the controversy of our nation currently, like, I'm American and like I'm doing my civil duty, and it just felt really good. I felt really important. I just don't agree, like aside from all that, I don't agree with the trend of like asking who you voted for. I just don't think that it's respectful. Like, I think it's ridiculous because everyone has their right to privacy.
It's funny because when I was younger, when I was a child, I remember that there were three things you never really talked about, and it was it was politics, religion, and money. And I think that kind of held true until social media exploded, and then everyone was just giving their opinion because it was like they were behind this like screen. How did it feel for you, Mike?
It was really exhilarating. I had voted in Florida's general and primary election in 2018 during the governor's run, and that was cool, but it felt a little different with it being presidential, since you have to be, I mean, I was 18 at the time of the primaries, but obviously that was in the middle of the term of Trump, and it really felt great. There was a great atmosphere there, because I was a young face showing up, and I am in a pretty kid heavy populated city, but they were still happy to see another young face walk through to come vote. I didn't want to share my vote either, which I refrained from doing on my public social media pages. If you and the person you're asking, are able to respect each other, then it's fine, but I think it's also important to respect people that don't say who they voted for, because it is a personal choice. You made a personal decision based on your confidence in that person's ability to run the country, and when it comes to that, such a high figure, obviously not everyone's going to agree, because with every set of candidates we get, they all have their own agendas and their own ways of doing things, and it's hard to narrow it down to two people, which is why there's so much polarity. Even though obviously some people didn't vote, it was most of the people who did vote were Gen Z, like I was talking about earlier, and I think I felt really good to be part of that.
I know personally I had friends that felt the need to criticize me for my own progressive views. I believe that everything I advocate for, progress, needs to be made, and they don't align with many other people's views, and I'm okay with that. But I'm seeing it everywhere, and multiple friends of mine, they're kind of being cut off by family, friends, not talking. Do either of you feel like that's affecting you in any way?
I think it's always been that way, regardless of whether it was an election year or not, that there's always, at any family gathering, especially with my family, there's always bound to be, even if the politics never come up, there's always something that goes wrong.
Everyone is allowed to hold their own opinions, as long as those opinions aren't threatening anyone's life or culture.
Gen Zers, like Mike, you were saying, when you saw that you were a part of this generation of voters, I really do feel like you guys are the last best hope for kind of taking on the world's challenges. And, I've been encouraged by a lot of the things that we've talked about. And I think we're going to be okay, to be honest. What message would you guys want to leave?
Finding authentic people is really hard. Authenticity is one of the best qualities you can find in a person or in a relationship, any type of relationship. And it comes with vulnerability. And personally, I struggle with showing my vulnerabilities to someone. And I've actually talked about this with my therapist. And with that, I want to say that it's okay to show them, no matter if you know the person that well or not. Like, I think that if you get heartbroken, because someone disregarded your vulnerabilities, like, at least you know that you put yourself out there and you learned a valuable lesson about who that person is, and now you can read that type of person better, and like, you let something out from your heart. And I think that's very important.
Yeah. Mike?
Yeah. I would say just try to take the good with the bad, and if you want to be extra cheesy, don't give up, because if anything this year has taught me, if this year's taught me anything, it's there's always silver linings to a cloud. And even when the world is out of our control, which this entire year it has been, we can only control what we do or how we react to it. And I've made my mistakes this year and how to react to it, but through your trial and error, and see what works for you, as long as it's healthy and keeps you safe from the virus. If you can find that happy medium, I think that's honestly your ticket to get through this whole thing.
Thank you guys. Not
Thank
only
you.
for your amazing work that you guys have done for me, but for joining me today to bring in your perspective.
Of course,
Thank
thank
you.
you for having us.
You.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to learn more about my guests, Sarah Correa-DeBar and Mike Robb, please visit my website at atstpodcast.com. That's the letter A, atstpodcast.com, and click under featured guests. There you can find their social media links and all of their information and bios. I want to thank you all for your support, for my own self-care, more time to be with my family during the holidays. I will be taking a hiatus, and we'll be back with new interviews and some special episodes for the new year. Also, please visit my YouTube channel, Trauma Survivor Thrivers, to get bonus material, and please subscribe and follow me on all my social media platforms for the latest information about the podcast. I'm Lori Binstock, and you've been listening to a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast. I will see you in the new year with brand new episodes you won't want to miss. Have a happy, healthy, and safe end of this year.